Because Christianity isn't just a set of ideas that people hold casually. It makes very strong claims about reality. It makes claims about who God is, who we are, what's right and wrong, what our purpose is, and what ultimately happens to us. I've been told before that without accepting those beliefs, I don't have true purpose, or that I'm separated from God, or that I will endure eternal conscious punishment. Christians are allowed to say that my view is wrong, incomplete, or even dangerous for my life or my eternity. And I can hear that. I've heard that. But when I say that I don't come to the same conclusions about the Bible, now it becomes something more than a disagreement. Now it's labeled as an attack. So I think the fair question is, are we applying that same standard to both sides? I think we should. What's going on? It's Joe Teal, and this is another episode of the Agnostic Bible Study. If you spend any time talking about difficult subjects like religion or politics on the internet, it's pretty likely that at some point, someone has taken a problem with your ideas. And if that hasn't happened to you, then you're probably a master of words. I, Joe Teal, am not a master of words. And since I spent so much time publicly examining Christianity, I've definitely received my fair share of pushback. But there's one specific kind of pushback that keeps coming up, and that's the claim that what I'm doing here is attacking Christianity. So instead of reacting to that, I want to slow down and actually think through that. Is that true? Am I attacking Christianity? Since I spend so much of my time in conversations and debates about this stuff, I think the smartest thing to do here is to define our terms from the beginning. Because when someone says, I'm attacking Christianity, what does that actually mean? Does attacking mean disagreeing? Does attacking mean asking questions? Does it mean pointing out things in the text that seem inconsistent or difficult? Or does it mean something more like mocking, misrepresenting, or intentionally trying to tear something down? Because those are not the same thing. And if we don't define that clearly, then any disagreement can just be labeled as an attack. And that shuts down all the conversations before they even start. So for this conversation, I think it's important to separate those ideas. There's a difference between challenging a belief and attacking a person. There's a difference between examining a text and trying to tear down someone's identity. And if we're going to have honest conversations about something as big as the Bible or Christianity, we've got to be able to tell the difference. Because if simply asking questions counts as an attack, then we're not really allowed to examine anything. In my opinion, for me to actually be attacking Christianity, I would have to go beyond asking questions and move into things like mocking, misrepresenting, intentionally trying to tear it down, or personally attacking the people who believe it. And that's an important distinction because questioning something even strongly is not the same as attacking it. So what am I actually trying to do here? Every episode and every post I make, I'm not just throwing out random opinions. I spend a lot of time looking at both sides of these arguments. I try to understand the Christian perspective as clearly and fairly as I can. That means listening to people who believe this, reading their arguments, and taking their position seriously. At the same time, I'm also looking at the historical side, the textual side, and the critical scholarship around the Bible. And then what I do is bring those things together and ask questions. Sometimes I agree with certain points, and sometimes I don't. But the goal is not to misrepresent anything. It's to understand it and then examine it. And I think it's important to say, a lot of people are not seeing the full episodes where I can actually explain these ideas in detail. What they're seeing is short posts and clips where I'm condensing a much bigger idea into a few sentences. And when you compress something that complex down that much, it's really easy for it to come across the wrong way or be misunderstood. So I get why some of these posts might feel more direct or even more critical than what I'm actually trying to do in full conversation. But the longer episodes tell a much more complete story of how I'm thinking through these things. I've had long conversations with people who hold these beliefs. I listen to scholars on both sides pretty much every day and am constantly trying to challenge my own conclusions as well. Because if I'm going to challenge Christianity, then my own view should be just as open to scrutiny. So what you're seeing here isn't an attack. It's an ongoing process of trying to understand something that is actually really complex. We're talking about a 2,000-year-old religion with roots that go back even farther than that. We're talking about God. We're talking about reality. These are huge, heavy topics. And another issue with condensing these ideas is that my conclusions usually come out of a much larger framework of research. I know the steps that got me there because I'm the one who spent hours building those thoughts piece by piece. I know the background. I know the tension points. I know the other side of the argument, and I know what questions led me there. But when I make a post or a short clip, you're not getting the whole framework. You're getting the conclusion and maybe a few parts of the reasoning without all the steps that built it. So I may be speaking from a much larger structure of thought while the person reading it is only receiving this small piece that can fit inside that post or clip. And that gap matters because something that makes sense inside a larger body of research can sound much more blunt, much more dismissive, and much more certain when it gets stripped down to just a few lines on a screen. It can kind of feel like walking into a math class and only seeing the final answer on the board without any of the work that led up to it. That answer might look wrong or confusing or look like it came out of nowhere. But if you saw all the steps that led there, it might make more sense. And that's similar to what's happening with a lot of these posts and clips. Now, I think this is where the conversation really starts to matter because Christianity isn't just a set of ideas that people hold casually. It makes very strong claims about reality. It makes claims about who God is, who we are, what's right and wrong, what our purpose is, and what ultimately happens to us. I've been told before that without accepting those beliefs, I don't have true purpose, or that I'm separated from God, or that I will endure eternal conscious punishment. And while not all Christians subscribe to that, eternal conscious punishment is the most widely accepted view of hell in evangelical Christianity. So when we're talking about something that carries that level of weight, I don't think it's unreasonable to examine it closely. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask hard questions. I don't think it should be off limits to talk about it publicly because if a belief system is making claims that big about reality, then those claims should be able to be explored, questioned, and discussed. And this is where there's an important consistency question that comes up. Because if I'm being told that questioning Christianity or disagreeing with it is an attack, then we have to ask, does that standard apply across the board? Because Christianity itself makes claims about other beliefs. It doesn't just say it's true. In most cases, it also says that other views are incorrect. So if I come to a different conclusion and say I don't agree, why is that considered an attack, but the original claim isn't? Is Christianity itself an attack on people who don't believe? I wouldn't say so. But if you think my disagreements with Christianity are an attack, I would just ask for the same consistency. Because disagreement is happening in both directions. Christians are allowed to say that my view is wrong, incomplete, or even dangerous for my life or my eternity. And I can hear that. I've heard that. But when I say that I don't come to the same conclusions about the Bible, now it becomes something more than a disagreement. Now it's labeled as an attack. So I think the fair question is, are we applying that same standard to both sides? I think we should. Because if disagreement only becomes a problem when it's directed one way, then we're not really talking about fairness anymore. Because if we're both allowed to disagree, then we should both be able to handle being disagreed with. And I think this leads into another important part of this conversation, which is responsibility. Because at the end of the day, we all have some level of responsibility for the information we choose to engage with. Nobody is being forced to watch these episodes. Nobody is being forced to read these posts. People are choosing to click on them, to listen, and to engage. And I understand that some of these topics can feel personal. I really do. I really get that. But disagreement, even on something important, is not the same as harm. And if something I'm saying is wrong, the best response to that is to engage with it, to challenge it, and to point out where it falls apart. not to shut it down by labeling it as an attack. The way I understand it is more like a testing environment. An attack is aimed at a person. Testing is about examining something to see if it holds up. And that's what I see this space as. I'm not targeting people, I'm examining ideas. So if someone chooses to step into that space and engage with those ideas, then being challenged or tested isn't the same thing as being attacked. Because what we're doing here is testing ideas. And some of these ideas are heavy. Because if ideas are true, they should be able to stand up to questions. And if that can't be questioned, then that raises a different kind of concern. So I think it's important that we allow space for these conversations to happen, even if they're uncomfortable, because context matters. I am not coming at this as someone who is completely outside Christianity looking in. I was raised in a Christian home. I grew up going to church. I spent years in a Christian school. I lived in the Bible Belt my entire life, and for a period of time, I was even a youth pastor. So this isn't something I just randomly decided to start critiquing one day. This was my framework. This is how I saw the world. This was something I believed, taught, and tried to live out. And over time, my views changed. But that didn't remove any of my interest from it. If anything, it made me want to understand it even more. And honestly, in my 31 years of life, I have never been approached by another religion. So this is the belief system that has been presented to me, that I lived in, and that shaped how I saw everything. If I woke up tomorrow, opened up the Quran, and started pointing out flaws, I would be much more of an outsider speaking on someone else's holy book. But the Bible was my holy book. And I know some Christians might say that because I'm no longer a Christian, I've lost my insider perspective. But my change in belief doesn't erase my life experience with Christianity. It just doesn't. Because whether I believe it or not, Christianity still makes claims about reality, about truth, and about people like me. And so when I talk about the Bible or question certain ideas, I'm not doing that as an outsider throwing rocks. I'm doing it as someone who has been on the inside, trying to understand it as clearly and honestly as I can. This isn't distant from me. It's personal. So when it comes back to the original question, am I attacking Christianity? Is the Agnostic Bible Study a danger to Christianity? I don't think I am. I don't think it is. I think I'm examining ideas. I think I'm trying to understand something that has had a major impact on my life and still makes very real claims about the world I live in today. And I understand not everyone is going to agree with me, and that's fine. That's not an attack. If you disagree with my views, you're not attacking me. If I disagree with your views, I am not attacking you. We are disagreeing with each other's ideas, not each other as people. And if we want to have honest conversations about something as important as this, we have to be able to separate those two things. And as always, don't just take my word for any of this. Open up the sources for yourself. Look into it. Ask your own questions. Come up with your own conclusions. Thanks again for hanging out with me on another episode of the Agnostic Bible Study. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I would be really interested to hear how you think through this. And if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow and rate the show so you don't miss future episodes and you can give me a little boost out to the masses. We're only just a little over a month in and we're already 13 or 14 episodes in, so I hope you can see that I'm going to be consistently bringing you Bible content. So remember, never stop learning. We'll see y'all next time.